Every morning of my life started the same way: strong coffee at dawn, a quick breakfast, and then the slow click-click of my sewing machine as I opened my tiny tailoring shop. I never had much, but I had enough. And I had my son Malik. When his father walked away from us, Malik was only 5. That day taught me something simple but powerful. A woman can rebuild an entire world with her own 2 hands. I stitched wedding gowns for brides I would never meet again, hemmed suits for men who barely remembered my name, and embroidered delicate blouses for church ladies who wanted elegance without the price. The hours were long, my fingers often numb, but I never complained. Malik grew up watching me work, watching the way fabric transforms when treated with patience. As a boy, he used to sit beside me, swinging his legs and asking how I always knew what each customer needed. Because people speak, I'd tell him, even when they don't use words. He studied hard, played basketball outside our shop, and promised me the same thing every night: "Mama, one day I'll make life easier for you." And I believed him, because he had a good heart, sincere, responsible, tender. When he earned a scholarship to a respected business school, I felt every sacrifice melt into pride. I worked double shifts to cover what the scholarship didn't. Skipped vacations, skipped rest, skipped everything so my boy could graduate debt-free. And he did, with honors. Soon he had a job at a well-known real estate firm. He brought me flowers every Sunday, wore suits I tailored myself, and kissed my forehead before leaving. "Everything I am is because of you," he'd say, and in those moments, life felt complete. Then he met Adriana. The first time he said her name, something in his voice shifted. He described her as gentle-spoken, refined. From a well-known family in the upscale north side of the city. Her father owned multiple hardware stores. Her mother, Loretta, was known for her sharp tongue and sharper opinions. When Malik told me he wanted us to meet, I pulled out my best navy dress and my mother's pearl earrings. I wanted to look worthy of my son's new world. But the dinner didn't go as I imagined. Adriana smiled politely, but without warmth. Loretta asked questions that sounded like compliments, but felt like insults. And somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered a warning I tried to ignore. I didn't know it then, but that night was the first tiny crack in a life I had fought so hard to build in. The storm was only beginning. 3 months after that uncomfortable first meeting, Adriana's family invited me to dinner at their home. Malik insisted it would be good for all of us, that his future in-laws wanted to bond. I tried to believe him, but a heaviness settled in my stomach the moment we pulled up to their enormous house. It was the kind of place where everything gleamed but nothing felt warm. Loretta greeted us at the door, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, perfectly cold. "Welcome, Miss Lena," she said, as if my name tasted strange in her mouth. Adriana followed behind her, gliding like she owned the air around her. Malik, eager to please them both, fell into step with them immediately. I felt like a guest at my own son's future. Dinner was served at a long table polished so bright it reflected our faces. Loretta spoke endlessly about her social circle, her charity luncheons, their plans for vacations on the coast. Everything sounded like a list of achievements meant to remind me how small my world was compared to hers. Then Adriana placed a hand on Malik's arm and said sweetly, "Mama and I were talking. Malik really needs a bigger car after we marry. Something suitable." Malik chuckled awkwardly. "The one I have is fine," but she insisted, and her mother nodded as if the decision had already been made. I felt a sting in my chest. Malik had worked hard for that car. It represented independence, responsibility, but to them, it was merely modest. I tried to hold my voice steady as I said, "My son knows what's best for himself." For the first time that night, Loretta looked directly at me. Really looked. "Of course he does," she replied, her smile sharp. "We only want what's best for our new family." New family. The words cut deeper than she knew. Throughout the evening, they discussed wedding plans, venues, floral arrangements, the cathedral where generations of their family had married. They spoke as though Malik's side barely existed, as though my son came from nowhere and no one. They didn't ask for my thoughts, didn't include me in a single decision. Later, when Adriana left the table, Loretta leaned closer and lowered her voice. You seem sensible, so let me be honest. Malik has a chance for a better life. He must focus on his future, not remain tied to past burdens. Past burdens. I realized she meant me. I left the dinner with a polite smile, but inside, something fragile had begun to tear. And I had no idea that this was only the beginning, that something far darker was already happening behind closed doors. After that tense dinner, I expected Malik to notice my discomfort. I thought he would ask what was wrong, or at least acknowledge how Adriana's family treated me like I didn't belong. But instead, the days that followed revealed something far more painful. My son was changing. It was subtle at first. He visited less often, claiming work deadlines and wedding planning. Our Sunday breakfasts once, our unbreakable tradition, became quick phone calls. When I reminded him about taking time for himself, he would sigh and say, "Mama, you have to understand, things are different now." Different. That word became a wall between us. Adriana's influence seeped into every part of his life. She suggested he move closer to her family. And soon, Malik announced he'd applied for an apartment on the north side. It's closer to my office, he insisted, though we both knew convenience wasn't the real reason. I kept quiet, not wanting to push him away. A mother's heart knows when to fight and when to brace for impact. One afternoon, I stopped by his workplace to surprise him with homemade lunch. The receptionist recognized him immediately, but when she returned from his office, she looked confused. He just stepped out with his fiancée's mother, she said. They seemed busy. A strange uneasiness crawled through me. Why was Loretta visiting him at work? That evening I called Malik. He answered quickly. Too quickly, as if expecting someone else. "Mama, can we talk later?" he whispered. Background voices echoed Adriana's sharp tone, Loretta's instructions. He hung up before I could respond. He wasn't my Malik anymore. He was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone performing a role in a world that looked down on where he came from. A week later, he invited me to a bridal fitting. I assumed Adriana wanted my opinion, but when I arrived, she barely glanced at me. Her mother directed every decision, the dress, the veil, even the jewelry. Malik sat quietly beside them, smiling politely, not once meeting my eyes. I stood there as they removed the original dress, which Adriana claimed looked too simple, Loretta suggested. A designer gown from Europe costing more than what I earned in 3 months. Malik opened his mouth to protest, but Adriana squeezed his hand. And just like that, he agreed. I watched him sign the payment slip with trembling fingers. That's when I realized the truth. Love wasn't the only thing binding him to that family. Expectations, pressure, control, it was all tightening around him like invisible strings. But the real blow came days later when I discovered exactly what Adriana and her mother had been plotting behind my back. 2 days after the fitting, I stopped by Malik's new apartment with a basket of food. I had a key, he'd given it to me in case of emergencies. I never misused it, but something inside me felt unsettled. His voice had been strained for days, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When I entered, the apartment was unusually quiet. Malik wasn't home, but voices drifted from the bedroom's soft, urgent whispers. I moved closer, and through the half-open door, I saw Adriana and her mother standing over Malik's desk, rifling through his documents. My heart pounded. Adriana lifted a stack of papers. "If he signs these before the wedding," she said, "everything will transfer automatically. He won't even question it." Loretta nodded with satisfaction. "Exactly. Once the house and accounts are under our control, he'll stay where we want him. He's too guilty to turn his back on us now. Guilty. I froze. Adriana added, we just have to make sure his mother stays out of the way. She's too attached. Her tone was sharp, almost mocking. They hadn't seen me yet. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay silent. When they left the room, laughing softly, I slipped out of the apartment as quickly as I could. My legs nearly gave out by the time I reached my car. My son, my sweet, hard-working boy, was being manipulated, controlled, and used. And worse, they saw me as an obstacle. That night, I waited for Malik at my old sewing shop. When he arrived, exhausted and distracted, I told him everything what I'd heard, what I'd seen, what they were planning. At first, he rejected it. Mama, they wouldn't do that, he insisted. You must have misunderstood. But when I described the exact documents, his bank statements, property forms, insurance papers, his face drained of color. He knew I was telling the truth. For the first time in months, the boy I raised resurfaced. I'm so sorry, Mama, he whispered, gripping my hands. I didn't see it. I thought they loved me. I wiped his tears like he was 5 again. They loved what you could give them. That's not love. The next morning, Malik ended the engagement. There were arguments, threats, accusations, but he stood his ground. And when he walked away from that house, he walked back toward himself. Today, my son visits every Sunday again. We share breakfast, we laugh, we heal. The world tried to pull him away. But the bond we built stitch by stitch held strong. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Sometimes the deepest battles aren't fought with enemies, but with the people who pretend to love you. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people remember. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.